When the judge strikes that gavel and says the words life imprisonment, most people think they know exactly what that means. You imagine a cinematic fade to black, a heavy iron door slamming, and a person disappearing into a hole forever. But the truth is, life in prison is one of the most misunderstood concepts in the entire legal system. Depending on where you are in the world, or even which state you are in, a life sentence could mean 40 years, it could mean 15 years with a chance of parole. Or it could quite literally mean you are staying in that cage until your very last breath. Today we are pulling back the curtain on the confusing, often contradictory reality of what a life sentence actually looks like from the inside. We are going to explore why some lifers walk free, while others are forgotten, the psychological warfare of living without a calendar, and the hidden mechanics of a system designed to keep people in a state of permanent limbo. If you think life in prison is just a long stay in a small room, you are only seeing the surface. Let's get into the real meaning of forever. The first thing we have to break down is the massive difference between life with parole and life without parole. This is where the public often gets frustrated. You see a headline about someone getting life for a terrible crime, and then 10 years later, you see them walking down the street. This isn't usually a mistake or a glitch in the system. It is how the law is written. In many jurisdictions, a life sentence is technically an indeterminate sentence. But they also have the option to let you go after a certain minimum period, usually 15, 20, or 25 years. It is the system's way of keeping inmates compliant. If you know there is a chance, even a tiny one, that you might see the sky as a free man again, you are much less likely to cause trouble inside. You become a model inmate because every single thing you do is being recorded for a parole board that won't meet for another 2 decades. But then there is the other side of the coin. Life without the possibility of parole or LWOP. This is the administrative equivalent of being erased from society. When you receive this sentence, the state is telling you that you are no longer a citizen. You are a permanent ward of the Department of Corrections. There is no carrot. There is no stick. There is only the routine. For these inmates, the meaning of life changes entirely. They don't look at a calendar, because the days don't lead anywhere. They look at the clock, just trying to get through the next hour. The psychological impact of knowing that the room you are standing in is the room where you will grow old and eventually pass away is something the human brain isn't naturally equipped to handle. It leads to a phenomenon many call prison sleep, where inmates spend as much time as possible unconscious, just to make the time move faster. Let's talk about the physical reality of the environment. But a life sentence is lived in the common areas, the chow halls, and the recreation yards. If you are doing life, you aren't just a visitor. This is your neighborhood. You learn the politics of the yard, like someone learns the politics of their office. You know which guards are reasonable and which ones are looking for a reason to write a report. You know which areas of the yard are safe, and which ones are controlled by certain groups. For a lifer, navigating these social waters is a full-time job. One wrong word or one perceived sign of disrespect can have consequences that last for years. In the outside world, if you have a falling out with a neighbor, you can move or just ignore them. In prison, you might be eating lunch 20 feet away from that person for the next 30 years. That kind of forced proximity creates a pressure cooker environment that never truly cools down. One of the most profound things about a life sentence is the loss of agency. Every single aspect of your existence is decided by someone else. You are told when to stand up to be counted. You are told when you are allowed to shower. You are told what you will eat, and you often have no choice in the matter. This creates a state of learned helplessness. After a decade or two of being told when to move, many lifers lose the ability to make basic decisions for themselves. This is why you hear those heartbreaking stories of men who get paroled after 40 years and find themselves standing in a grocery store aisle, completely overwhelmed because they have to choose between 20 different types of cereal. In prison, there is no choice. There is only the tray. The sensory world of a lifer is also incredibly restricted. Think about the variety of sounds you hear in a single day. The wind in the trees, a dog barking, the hum of traffic, a child laughing, music playing in the distance. The soundscape is industrial and harsh. It is the sound of metal on metal, the shouting of men, the jangling of keys, and the constant, oppressive drone of industrial fans. There is no quiet, and there is certainly no silence. For someone doing life, The lack of natural sounds can lead to a kind of sensory starvation. They become obsessed with small things. They might spend an hour watching a bird land on the razor wire, because it is the only thing in their world that isn't made of concrete and steel. Let's look at the financial reality of life inside. Most people think taxpayers foot the entire bill. And while that is true for the basics, a lifer's quality of life depends heavily on their ability to make money. This is the world of the prison economy. If you want better food from the commissary, shoes that don't hurt your feet, or the ability to call your family, you need money. Lifers often take the most stable, long-term jobs in the prison. They work in the braille shop, the furniture factory, or the laundry. They earn pennies an hour, but over 20 years those pennies add up. This economy creates a class system inside. For a lifer with no family on the outside to send them money, life is a constant struggle for the most basic comforts. They might trade their bread for a stamp or do someone else's laundry just to buy a bar of decent soap. The concept of family is perhaps the most painful part of a life sentence. In the beginning, the visiting room is full. But as the years go by, the visits get fewer and farther between. Siblings move on with their lives. Children, who were toddlers when you went in, grow up and become strangers who don't know how to talk to you. For a lifer, the visiting room is a place of joy that is always followed by a crash of depression. You see the world moving on without you. You see your daughter's wedding photos and realize you weren't there. You see your grandchildren growing up and realize they only know you as a voice on a recorded phone line. Eventually, many lifers stop accepting visits, because the pain of seeing what they have lost is more than they can bear. They prefer to live in the bubble of the prison, where the outside world doesn't exist. As a lifer, you are watching yourself age in a place that is not built for the elderly. Prison infirmaries are often equated to a nightmare. You are essentially at the mercy of the state for your health. If you develop a chronic condition, you are waiting months for a specialist. You are navigated through a system that is often more concerned with security than with care. You see men in their 70s navigated by guards, struggling to walk to the chow hall. There is something deeply unsettling about an elderly person in a maximum security environment. They are no longer a threat to anyone, but the law says they must remain. This leads to the controversial topic of compassionate release, where inmates who are clearly at the end of their journey are allowed to leave to spend their final days with family. But these requests are often denied, leaving lifers to pass away in a clinical, sterile room with only a guard for company. Let's talk about the concept of time again. For a lifer, time isn't a line, it's a circle. The routine is so intense that years can blend together into one long, gray blur. You ask a lifer what happened in 2005, and they might not be able to tell you because 2005 looked exactly like 2015. This erosion of memory is a survival mechanism. If you remembered every single detail of every single day, the weight of the repetition would break you. So the brain shuts down. It stops recording the mundane. This is why many long-term inmates seem to have a strange, detached personality. They are protecting themselves from the crushing weight of their own history. There is also the element of prison politics and the internal legal system. Lifers are often the most knowledgeable people in the prison when it comes to the law. They spend hours in the law library, reading cases and looking for ways to challenge their sentences. They become jailhouse lawyers, helping younger inmates with their paperwork. This gives them a sense of purpose and a way to fight back against the system that has consumed them. For some, this intellectual pursuit is the only thing that keeps them sane. It is a way to prove that their mind is still free, even if their body is not. But what about the victims? This is a crucial part of what a life sentence really means. For the families of the victims, a life sentence is supposed to represent justice and closure. But often, it doesn't work that way. Every time a lifer has a parole hearing, a new appeal, or a chance at a sentence reduction, the families are forced to relive the trauma all over again. The life sentence becomes a permanent bond between the inmate and the victim's family, a heavy chain that neither side can truly break. The term life doesn't just apply to the person behind bars. It applies to the shadow the crime casts over everyone involved for the rest of their lives. The socialization process in prison is another world entirely. When you are doing life, you have to form a new social structure. You find a group of people you can trust, often other lifers. This becomes your prison family. You celebrate birthdays with a stolen piece of cake. You mourn together when someone's relative passes away. These bonds are incredibly intense because they are the only ones you have. But even these relationships are fragile. At any moment, the administration can decide to move your friend to another facility across the state, and you will never see or hear from them again. In prison, everything is temporary, except the four walls. Let's look at the institutionalization of the lifer. This is the most tragic part of the story. After 30 or 40 years, the prison becomes the only world that makes sense. The rules are clear. The routine is predictable. The outside world, with its technology, its pace and its lack of structure, becomes terrifying. There are countless stories of lifers who finally get paroled and then commit a minor crime just to get sent back. They don't do it because they are bad people. They do it because they are lost. They have been so thoroughly broken by the system that they can no longer function as independent human beings. They are like deep-sea fish that would explode if you brought them to the surface. The prison has become their oxygen. The meaning of a life sentence also changes depending on the type of facility. Life in a minimum security camp is vastly different from life in a supermax. In a supermax, you might be in solitary confinement for 23 hours a day. Your only contact with another human is through a slot in the door. You don't see the sun. You don't see another person's face. Doing a life sentence in those conditions is essentially a slow-motion psychological erasure. The brain begins to hallucinate. The sense of self dissolves. This is where the debate over the humanity of these sentences becomes the most heated. Is it a punishment, or is it something much more permanent and damaging? There is also the issue of wrongful convictions. This is the nightmare scenario. Imagine you are doing a life sentence for something you didn't do. Every day you spend in that cell is a theft of your existence. For these lifers, the anger and the sense of injustice are like a fire that never goes out. They don't just exist. They fight. We see news stories every year of people being exonerated after 30 years of a life sentence. But how do you give someone back their youth? How do you compensate them for the 40 Christmases they missed? The system has no answer for that. The life sentence was served, and the time is gone forever. For the ones who are guilty, a life sentence is a process of reconciling with a version of themselves that no longer exists. A 60-year-old lifer is not the same person as the 20-year-old who committed the crime. They are biologically and psychologically different. But the law sees them as the same. This is the fundamental tension of the life sentence. It is a permanent punishment for a temporary version of a person. Many lifers spend their decades trying to atone, taking every class, participating in every program, and trying to mentor younger inmates to prevent them from following the same path. They are trying to find a way to make their life mean something, even if that meaning is contained within walls. Let's discuss the role of the guards in a lifer's life. Over the decades, the relationship often changes. It's adversarial. But after 20 years, the guards and the lifers have grown old together. They know each other's families. They've shared the same boring shifts and the same holidays. There is often a mutual respect that develops. The lifer knows the rules and doesn't cause trouble, and the guard gives them a bit more dignity than they give the newcomers. It's a strange, quiet dance of survival that takes place in the hallways every day. The concept of good time is often a source of confusion for the public. People see an inmate get life and think they will be out in 5 years. But in many states, especially after the truth in sentencing laws of the 90s, life means life. There is no good time. There is no early release. You serve every single day. Even in states where parole is an option, the parole boards are often politically motivated and extremely hesitant to let lifers go, especially for high-profile crimes. This means that a life sentence with parole is often effectively a life sentence without parole. The hope is there, but the reality is a locked gate. The environmental conditions of older prisons add another layer of difficulty. Many facilities are decades or even centuries old. They lack air conditioning in the summer and have poor heating in the winter. For an aging lifer, the extreme cold and heat are not just uncomfortable. They can be life-threatening. They live in a state of physical misery that adds to the mental weight of the sentence. The smell of old pipes, the sight of mold on the walls, and the constant presence of vermin become the backdrop of their entire life. It is a slow wearing down of the human spirit through the environment. When an inmate finally realizes that they are never going home, a strange kind of peace often settles over them. This is the lifer's acceptance. They stop fighting the system and start living within it. They find joy in small things, Like a particularly good book from the library, or a conversation with a friend, they become the keepers of the prison's history. They are the ones who know what happened in the riot of '88 or why a certain wing of the prison is always colder than the others. They become part of the architecture of the place. But let's not romanticize it. Life in prison is a wasteland. It is a place where potential goes to fade away. Think of the artists, the writers, the thinkers, and the leaders who are currently sitting in a cell, their talents completely buried under a life sentence. While the system is designed to punish and protect, it also results in a massive loss of human capital. Every life sentence is a story that has been cut short, a book that has been closed halfway through. The tragedy of prison is not just what happens inside, but what is prevented from happening outside. The sentence is a form of secondary incarceration. They have to plan their lives around visiting schedules and expensive phone calls. They have to deal with the stigma of having a loved one in prison. They are the ones who have to explain to the grandchildren why grandpa isn't coming home. The life sentence ripples out from the cell, touching dozens of people who never committed a crime. It is a collective weight that a family has to carry for generations. The economics of the lifer are also interesting when it comes to the legal system. A lifer is expensive. As they age, their medical costs skyrocket. The state ends up paying millions of dollars to keep an 80-year-old man in a high-security cell. This is why some states are beginning to rethink the life sentence, not out of mercy, but out of financial necessity. They are realizing that keeping people in prison forever is a drain on resources that could be used for education or crime prevention. The meaning of life, in this case, is a line item on a state budget. As a lifer approaches their final years, they often become a figure of mystery to the younger inmates. They are the ones who have survived. They have seen the system change from the old days of brutal punishments to the modern era of administrative control. They have a perspective on human nature that is raw and unfiltered. They have seen the best and worst of people, often in the same person. This wisdom is a heavy burden. They have seen too much, felt too much, and lost too much. What does life in prison really mean? It means the total surrender of the future. It means living in a world where your past is your only possession. It means watching the clock count down to a day that will look exactly like yesterday. It is a punishment that targets the very essence of human identity. It is designed to make you a non-person. But the resilience of the human spirit is such that even in the most restricted environments, so the next time you hear a judge say life, don't think of a movie ending. Think of a long, slow journey through a gray landscape. Think of a man watching his daughter's wedding through a grainy photo. Think of an elderly woman struggling to walk to a chow hall. Think of the silence of a cell at 4 in the morning. Life in prison is not a moment. It is a million moments of repetition, restriction, and loss. It is the most profound weight a society can place on a human being. Realizing the depth of this reality often changes how people think about justice. It's not just about lock them up and throw away the key. When you throw away the key, you are also throwing away a human life, with all its complexities, its potential for change, and its connections to others. The life sentence is a mirror to our values as a society. It asks us what we believe about redemption, about punishment, and about the value of time. If you are listening to this, I want you to take a moment and just look around you. Look at the colors, hear the sounds, and feel the freedom of your own movement. For thousands of people, that simple reality is a distant memory, something they might only see again in a dream. That is the true meaning of life in prison. It is the permanent absence of everything we take for granted. It is a world of concrete shadows and steel echoes, where the word tomorrow has no meaning. Thank you for exploring this difficult topic with us. Understanding the reality of the prison system is the first step toward having an informed conversation about how we want our society to function. It is a world that most of us will never see, but its impact on our culture, our laws, and our fellow humans is immense. Stay curious, stay empathetic, and remember that every number in the system has a story. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other. The prison system is a reflection of our collective choices, and understanding it is part of being a citizen of the world. Even though these stories are often hidden behind high walls and razor wire, they are part of the human experience. We shouldn't look away, even when it's uncomfortable, because only by looking at the truth can we ever hope to find a path toward a better, more just future for everyone. Whether it's the lifer looking for a way to atone, the guard trying to maintain order, or the family waiting for a phone call. Every one of these lives is a piece of the puzzle. The truth is never as simple as a headline or a court sentence. It's found in the quiet moments, the long years, and the resilient spirit that refuses to be completely broken, even when the world says it's over. Keep learning, keep questioning, and keep watching. There is always more to the story than what meets the eye.